Whether you're new to data engineering or you're very experienced within the field, you're going to find this video very useful. Why? In this video, I'm going to be taking you through an end-to-end data engineering project where not so many videos out there can take you through that and show you actually what data engineers do on a day-to-day basis. Is a question you've had, is a question almost everybody has had. What do data engineers do? How can I have an understanding on how they're able to take a data from the raw, transform the data and put it into the analytics model? Well, we're going to be doing all of that in this video. And again, what is the project about? Well, you all consume news, you go through your news feed, social media, and everywhere to understand what is happening around the world. But what if you can analyze the news that you hear every day? Instead of just hearing tariff on one of your favorite and popular news channel, you can actually get this data, do some analytics on it, do some sentiment analysis, and visualize your data by yourself. And we're going to get over to that. First is to get the data. My data is going to be coming from a news website, and they've provided me with an API which I'm going to be using to connect to the news website. And when I connect to the news website, I'm going to ingest that data using Databricks. I'll be using Databricks to ingest that data into my bronze layer. If you don't know anything about the bronze layer, the silver layer, and the gold layer, you can check out my other videos on the Medallion architecture. I have explained in detail how the Medallion architecture works and what each of those layers stand for. But I'm going to be going on with this. And after that, I'm going to be taking my data to the silver layer. But before I go to the silver layer, because the silver layer is all about transforming the raw data that I have in the bronze, because in the bronze layer, I'm not doing any transformation. It's going to be a direct copy of what is in the source that I'm going to have in the bronze. But when I'm going to the silver, I'm going to be doing a couple of things. Now let me explain what I have here at the top. At the top, I'm going to be doing a quality check. The data I get from the bronze, I'm going to be checking if this data meets certain quality standard that I've outlined, and these are the standards I want the data to meet before they move to the silver. And any of the records that fail to meet this standard, I'll move them into a storage I call the quarantine zone. I just want the bad records to go to this zone so that if I need to, I can do an analysis on it later or kind of give a report on the number of bad records I get every time I do my ingestion. And when I'm done with my quality check, I'm going to be doing a sentiment analysis. I'm going to be looking at the sentiment of the topics that I ingest into my layer. What is this data saying? Is it a positive? Is it neutral? Is it a negative sentiment on this data? Just to have more insight when I start doing some analytics. And after that, I'm now going to move my data to the gold layer. The gold layer is two ways. You could either want to do an aggregation on the gold, or you might want to do a data model. For the approach I'm going to be taking, I'm going to be doing an entire data model on the gold. I've got a single table that went from the bronze layer. I did some cleaning, did some quality check, and when I'm done with transforming and doing quality check, I do my sentiment analysis, and I come to the silver from the silver and I put it in a data model that goes to the gold. And this is where I explain about the data model on the gold. And when I'm done with the gold, I'm going to write these tables into a Hive Metastore. And the Hive is just giving it that SQL front end where the data analyst can use it in Power BI. Well, I'm not going to spend so much time here because in this video, we have a long way to go. We're going to be creating all of the resources that we need. So in Azure Portal, we're going to be creating all of the resources that we'll be needing for this project. First is we're going to be creating a resource group that's going to act as a container for everything. And we'll be creating our storage, creating our Databricks workspace. And from there, we'll take it on and see how we can go with this. So I'm in my Azure Portal, and when I go to my Azure Portal, I'm just going to go to create under the resource group. I've got my subscription. Normally, if I want to create my resources, I typically use Terraform. You can check out my video on using Terraform to create resources, but because in this video I want to be as detailed as possible and not trying to bring any form of complexity that I will need to now explain, that is why I decide to build everything on Azure Portal so you can just follow through. I have my subscription, and if you have that, the next is the resource group name. I'm going to call this news article. So I'm calling this news article RG, and I go to next. There's really nothing else for me to put because I'm okay with the region. Next, and after that I just create. And when I create, I come to the resource group that I've just created, which is this. And the next thing I could do is to create the resources that I need. First is I'm going to search for Databricks, and I'll be creating a Databricks workspace, and I'll click on create. I want it under this resource group that I've selected. And what can I call it? Let me call it news. I'm going to call it news article Databricks workspace. The same region. For the pricing tier, this is where you try to be a little bit careful. Because I'm the only one using this, I'm not trying to create any kind of role-based access control. I'm just going to click on the standard. So for the manage resource group name, I'm just going to give it something like news article Databricks RG. I go to next, which is networking. I'm good with this. This looks fine. This looks fine for me. And I'm just going to create. It's going to take a while, and when it's done, we just go to the resource. We have Databricks here, and the next thing we're going to create is to create our storage account. I search for storage account, and I'm going to choose this, the Microsoft storage account, and I'm going to say create. Remember, when creating your storage account has to be unique, and it shouldn't have any space or hyphen or anything. If you have a name, just bundle them together, and that's the reason I have numbers here, because I want to create this to be unique. I'm going to maintain the region I've been using, and for the primary service, I'm going to choose the Azure Blob or Azure Data Lake Storage N2. And I just recommend going with standard for almost everything, especially when you are just trying to do testing. I go to next. And this is the part that is very critical because I want to create the data lake storage N2. I'm going to click on this enable hierarchical namespace. And after that, I think I am okay. I'm not enabling any SFTP. And I go to next, next, and I could just keep going to next. Everything looks fine for me. I review and create. And if you've not, you should come to this website, newsapi.org. This is where I came into. I created an account, and when I created the account, I got an API I could use to get my news. And you could do this. I've done this already. I don't want to do it again, and just do it, and you're going to get the API key that we're going to use inside our code to continue with that. So I'm just going to give you a moment to do this, and we can go back to our Azure resources. So I think my Databricks workspace is ready, and my storage account is ready as well. Simply when you come to the Databricks workspace, you should see the status here as active. If yours is showing deploying, it's not ready yet, and you're not going to see the launch workspace. Mine is fine, and I'm going to launch this workspace now. Now it brings me here. The very first thing I'm going to do is to create a cluster. And we can come here for compute, and we are going to create a personal compute. So I'm going to create a compute. I come here and click create compute. And here it's showing the multi-node. I just want a single one. And it's just going to be a single compute. I'm the one just using it just for this project, and I don't expect it to be high-end or anything. I'm going to leave it as my name, David Ezekiel's cluster. And after that, I'm just going to come here and create my compute. My cluster is going to take a while to create, and while that is happening, let me go to my workspace. In my workspace, I'm going to be creating a folder, and that folder I'm going to be calling it the News Analytics Pipeline. And I'm going to create, and in this folder, that is where I'm going to have all of the notebook that I'm using for this project. Then I'm going to create the first notebook. And the first notebook, I'm going to call it this because this is the way I'm going to do the extraction from the source to the bronze layer. And I'm going to click on enter. And I'll go back again and I'll create another notebook. And this notebook is going to be for the Siva. And I'm going to give it a name, O2 Siva Transformation News Article. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back again. Then I'm going to create the third notebook, which is going to be for the Go transformation. Okay, then I go back The last one is going to be a very important one because I will need the helper functions. I'm going to be writing lots of functions and I don't want them to be in either of these notebooks. I want them to be in a separate notebook I'm going to call the helper notebook. I'm going to put it here, and this is going to be for the helper, all of the functions I'm going to be calling along the way. So when I go back, you see all of the notebooks that we've created for this particular project. We have the notebook for the bronze, we have the one for the silver, all of the transformations for silver, and the data modeling that will be done on the gold is going to be here, and we're going to have our helper functions. Let's get started with the helper function. Let me open this in another tab, that is the bronze notebook, and I come here, I'm going to open the helpers. And just to say ahead of time, because this is a video and I want to compress the time as much as possible, I have this code already written out and I'm going to be pasting them one after the other. But what I'm going to do for you is to explain each of them as I get them in. First is, these are all the functions I'm going to be using. I'm going to be importing them, and there's really no explanation to this. It's just the functions that will be used, and just the functions, the modules, and the class that I'm going to be using for this, I'm going to have them imported. And when I run this, and just to say that to run this, I'm using my Shift Enter. No, don't give me notification. My cluster should be ready and they should work. So it's telling me that this module TextBlob cannot be found, and TextBlob is the module I want to use for my sentiment analysis. It's very lightweight and just helps you to get that negative, neutral, positive part of your sentiment. And there are two ways I could do this. I could either do like a pip install on my notebook, or I could install it in the cluster. I think I prefer the latter because it's very easy for me to scale if I need to. Let me go to the compute and I'm going to come to my cluster. In the cluster, let me go to libraries and I'm going to say install new library. Install new library, and I'm going to go to PyPI and I'm going to search for it, TextBlob. Then I go to install. This is going to take a while, but it shouldn't take too long. So you see the green status tells me that my installation has been completed. I'll go back to my workspace and I'm going to try this again, and this is fine. So when I'm done with this, let's just go to our resource group on the Azure Portal, and on the resource group, let's go to our storage account. In my storage account, I'm going to be creating a container, and the container, I'm going to give it a name called the news data. I'm going to create the container where I'm going to have all of the different layers. So the next thing I'm going to do is to paste this function I wrote, and this function is to help me to write to data lake. Whether it's the bronze or the silver or the gold layer, when I ingest the data, I need to write it into a path. And I want to make it repeatable, reusable, so that anytime I don't need to write it over again, and that is why I'm putting it as my helper function. And this function is going to call for variables, the data frame, the layer I want it to be written into, the partitioning. Partitioning is very important, especially if the data is going to be very large volume of data. You know what your use case is. I'm going to partition in these, but really I don't really need to partition because I'm just working with a very small amount of data. But I'm going to partition to just kind of explain what the partitioning is. And for the mode I'm going to use append, which is good for my use case as the bronze. And after that, you could see what my path is. My path is actually looking at my storage account. I have my container, which is news data, and I have my storage account, which is this. And I think this should be good to go. So let's go to the bronze workspace, and in the bronze workspace, I'm going to be calling my helper function. I'm going to be calling the helper function in this cell. And when I run this called my helper notebook, and that is how I'm able to use it here. If I don't do this, I'm not able to create a kind of connection between this and this. So I'm calling this more like a module. And also I'm going to be importing a couple of functions that I'm going to be using here. So I've written a function, and the function is to ingest and write to the data lake. And this function is going to ask for it has a couple of arguments. Is first the API key, which I told you when you create an account here, you're going to have an API key assigned to you. It's going to ask for the country because the partitioning that I'm going to be doing is going to be dependent on country. And it's going to ask for the layer. What layer do you want your data to be in? So here I'm just saying get data from the API. I'm doing a get request. And the way API works, you are either getting or is being pushed. For my own use case, I'm doing a get and I'm providing what the endpoint is, which is this. And after that, I'm going to extract the articles. And when I'm done extracting the articles, I'm going to create a data frame. I'm going to put the article into a data frame. And when I'm done with that, and I'm just going to create additional columns, ingestion time, which is the time that I'm doing the ingestion, and the country is going to be what I provide in my argument. And I'm going to be creating a publish date that is formatted than the original date that I have. And after that, I'm going to be calling the function that I have from my help out notebook to write this into the data lake. And this is a good function. I just ran that. So this next thing is, this is where I call my function. This is the function that I created here. And this is where I'm going to call the function. And here I have my API key. I have the country I've provided. I have the layer, which is going to be bronze. And I suppose you have your API key, and I mentioned it here. Replace with your own API key, you specify the country, and you specify the layer. However, when I run this, I expect to have a problem because there's something I have not done. It's going to be so weird if that problem doesn't come up. Let me see. It says that the request is not defined, so I need to run this, but that is not even the problem I'm anticipating. It has to do with access restriction. I'm having this error because I really don't have any access. I don't have any access to my data lake storage. And what can I do? Because I need to have a link, a way to run a connection between my workspace and my storage account. There are many ways to do this, but I'm going to talk about two. First is I could create secret, and I'm going to create resources secret and do all of that. I have a video where I describe how you can create secret on Azure Portal. I could create secret, but I really don't want to do that. I want to use what is called a pass-through. A pass-through where I'm going to have my AD account, and I could actually interact with a storage account from Databricks using a pass-through cluster. If you're not able to do this, you might just stick to creating a secret scope and doing that. But for me, I'm going to upgrade to premium because I cannot do a pass-through with the standard tier. Let me upgrade to premium, and when I do that upgrade, it tells me that it's going to do the modification. I'm just going to give it a moment to complete this modification. And then I see here deploying. I'm just going to give it some moments to complete deploying. Okay, so I have my workspace upgraded to the premium, and you can see here it shows active. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my storage account. In my storage account, I can go to the access control. Here I'm going to go to role. I'm going to add role. The role, I'm going to look for read. Storage blob data reader. I'm going to click on view. Okay, yeah, this is it. So storage blob data reader, I'm going to go to next. I'm going to select member. And here I'm going to look for myself, which is this. I'm going to give myself the access to read. I'm going to do review and assign. That one is added. I'm going to add another one. Look for reader, storage blob data contributor. And I'm going to go to next. Choose a member. I'm going to choose myself. Going to go to select, review and assign. So with that, I think I should have the required access that I need. I'm going to go back to my Databricks workspace. And let me come to my compute. One more thing I need to do is now to grant this access on my compute. I click on my cluster. Let me edit the cluster. When you come down here, you're going to see the advanced options. I'm going to say enable credential pass-through for user level access. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to confirm and restart my cluster. It's going to take a while to restart. Okay, my cluster is ready. Let me try to see if I'm now good to go. I think I'll need to run everything again. I'm going to run my helper notebook, run this, and run the function I created, and this is where I call the function. If everything went well, this should work. Let me see. Well, when I run this, I'm still having some error. I want to assume this shouldn't be happening. Let me just quickly check for my, if this is fine, because this is likely going to come from here. If the storage account name, okay, I think there's a mistake here. This shouldn't be. Hopefully this resolves it. Let me try again. I'm going to run the helper again, and I'm just running through. Come here, let's run this. Awesome, it tells me that my data successfully written to my storage account and in my bronze layer, and it's append mode. Let's go to our Azure Portal and just see what has happened. This is my resource group. If I click on my storage account and I go to the data lake storage, I can see that this is the container that I created, and I can see my bronze layer already created, and I'll see all of the package files that have just been ingested. So let's just look at it as a data frame. This is my bronze part, and I'm just going to read. Doing read format delta. I'm going to read from this path. Let me see what my data looks like. And yeah, this is my data. This is the source. You can see the source looks like it's a key value pair, and you can see my author. You can see the title and the URL, the publish at, the ingestion time, country, and this looks really good. And this is just what is going to be in the, this is what's going to be in the bronze, and the bronze is like a direct replica of what is from the source. Now let's go to the Silver, and we're going to be doing something entirely different. Before we go to the Silver, we're going to be writing a couple of functions in the helper function. I think the Silver has more functions in helping it. Before we go to the Silver, let's just write all of these functions. First is, one of the things I want to do in the Silver is to format the columns, the column names. So everywhere I have space, I want to use underscore for it, and I also want it to come in uppercase. And this is the formatting I'm going to do on all the column names. Remember that the Silver is where you do all of your transformations, most of your formatting, and the way you want the data to be. And well, this might not really be an issue, but I just want to have it here because I don't know what data I could have. I'm going to be removing every HTML tags in it. And this is where I do the sentiment analysis. This is the library we installed, the TextBlob, and this is the function I'm going to use for the sentiment analysis. And the sentiment analysis is going to return whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. Now to the big one, which is the data quality part. To explain this, try to ignore this for now. This is just config, which I'm going to be using when I'm doing my data quality, but ignore this for now. In the class, I have different checks I'm doing for data quality. I'm checking nulls. Do we have null in this column? If we have null, just flag it, tell us null or empty values in the column. We're also checking for if column exists. There are specific columns that I want to exist in my entire data. These are critical columns that if they are not there, it just doesn't make sense having that data in. So I want to raise a quality check to tell me, does this column exist? If it exists, it goes. If it doesn't, it tells me that this data is missing. Not all the columns, obviously. If not, you are really not checking related news. Because it's appending, there could be the risk of having any kind of duplicate or running it more than once. And I'm going to have that use case here. I'm going to run it more than once, so you see how this is going to manage the cases of duplication. When I'm done with that, I'm now going to run it, and it tells me whether data quality is passed or data quality failed. And after that, I'm going to get the valid and invalid, get the bad records and the valid records, because I said that the valid is going to proceed to my Silver, whereas the bad record is going to be quarantined in a different storage. Yeah, initially I told you to ignore this. We're going to be using this in the Silver notebook. Instead of hard coding to say news articles, these are the required column, these are the not null, this is this, I want to have it here as a config, and I'm just going to read the config in my notebook. And if I want to make any adjustment, if I want to add any other key, I could come here and just do that. Well, this is the next function, and I call it the run the queue from config. I've got my config here, what I explained to you, and here I'm going to just be reading that config. I'm going to take the data frame and also the table name. And from there, I'm going to ask for the required column. I'm going to ask for all of these. And after that, this is where I call the individual modules under that class that are going to do the check column exists, check not null, and check for duplicates. The duplicate is going to be checked on the unique key, which is my URL from here. The not null is going to be checked on my title, published art, and URL. And here that I'm calling the check column exists is on the required column, and the required column here is the title, published art, and URL. All of this column should be present. If any of this column is not present in any of the data I get, I record it as a bad data. All right, with that off the way, I think we should be good. Let me go back here, go to my workspace, and I'm going to open the Siva, looking so blank. First is my helper function. I'm going to run this. Afterwards, I import a couple of functions, inbuilt functions and modules I'm going to be using in this part of the job. All right, so this is where all the complications come in. I'll try to explain. So I'm just going to register my user-defined functions, and this is what I did here, just to have the initial definition, because I mentioned that I'm going to be removing HTML and I'm going to be doing a sentiment analysis, which I've already defined this function. This is the critical part because the data now is in the bronze, data into a data frame, and assign it to this variable called the bronze df. Of course, I need to do some flattening because of the structure of the some of the fields in my data frame when I try to read the data frame. And I'm just going to be doing that, which is quite simple because it's just on the source. And after that, I'm going to run the dequeue from the config, and I'm going to be assigning it to two variables. One is for the valid and the other one is for the failed. Like I told you, I'm going to have the bad and the valid records, which should be what would come out from this. So when I run dequeue from config, I'm going to be providing the bronze df, and I'm going to be providing the news article and the config. Okay. And here I'm just trying to describe how I'm going to handle the quarantine. If this fails, if it fails any of the quality check, and I'm going to be writing them into a quarantine zone, which I've explained, and the payload is going to be all of the columns that failed. The source table is going to be the bronze.news article, which is the source table, and I'm going to put the ingestion time as well. And the quarantine is going to be arranged, the structure, the architecture of the quarantine is going to be on append, so you don't overwrite older records that are there. But if there's nothing in the bad records, well, I don't need to quarantine that. But if it's valid, I'm going to return all of the columns that I have if they remain valid. And this is just me now selecting these individual columns that I have. When I'm done with everything, I'm going to format this. Remember, the function I'm using for this formatting is format column names upper spaces. And I'm going to format the different column names that I have. And maybe I should delete this. It's really not necessary. When I was doing the test, I was using it to display that to see what it looks like. But this is where I do the write. The write, I'm still using the same write function, which I have here. I write to the data lake, and I'm going to be supplying the df, the data frame, mention the name of the layer. I'm going to be partitioning by country, and the mode is going to be overwrite. I don't want it append. Append should be for the bronze, and this should be overwrite. And when I'm done, it tells me transform clean data ready for Siva, and if there's any bad record, it moves the bad record to quarantine. Otherwise, it tells me no valid records available for Siva transformation. All right, let's test this and see how this is going to work. This is my bronze path, and this is my quarantine path. And for the quarantine, you should notice something different. In this, I have a container that I put all of my news data. But I'm creating a new container where I'm going to have all the quarantine. I don't want the quarantine data to be here. I want it to have like a different quarantine, and I'm going to use that quarantine, and I will use the quarantine container to manage all of my quarantining for different projects. This is news article. If I'm doing something on customer churn, I want it to go to the same quarantine container, but it's going to have its own separate folder for customer churn. And that is why I'm doing this here. And if I should run this, great, it tells me news article data quality passed, no records quarantined, bronze was 18, failed 0, valid is 18. And data successfully written to my silver and transform clean data ready for silver. This is good, but how do I test if this works, if everything is okay? I'm going to create a problem. Let me give a level of complication. Let's go back to our bronze notebook. On the bronze notebook, I'm going to run this again. And it's today. I think for my API call, I'm only able to get 18 rows per call for some reason. Let me run this again and add an additional 18, which is going to be the same news because it's still today. I should have some repetitions there. Let me run this again and append another 18 records to my list. This just completed now, and if I run this, my record is now 36. And if you look closely, you can see some level of repetition. Okay, let me try to filter for this author, and let's see the repetition we have for John Johnson. And for John Johnson, if I run this, you can see I have double record for John Johnson, and just across board, there are repetitions there. I can even make it more funny and run this again and just do it for the third time. And I'm going to have 3 layers of duplication. And this has increased to 54. And if I do John Johnson again, John Johnson should give me 3 records. Now it's complicated. Let me go to my silver again. And on my silver, let's run everything again. Let's see if we are going to pass the quality check or not. So it tells me that duplicate keys found on the URL. It quarantined about 54 bad records, and the bronze has 54 and failed 54 because they are repeated, and valid is only 0 because none of them is valid. They are all repetition, so no valid records available for silver transformation, and this is how it can be. In real life situations, you are unlikely to have a case where all of the different records are duplicated. But sometimes you could have like 50% duplicated, 50% not duplicated, and the 50 that are not duplicated are going to pass the quality check, whereas the ones that are duplicated will not pass the quality check. And that is just this for this demo. Sorry, all this while I made a mistake in my quarantine path because I came to this place, I just couldn't find my quarantine container. I didn't know that I made an error here, and this is not the right path. Let me put the right path. So it was writing to an old storage account that I have, and apologies for that. So here I'm going to create a container, call it my quarantine, and I'm going to create. Okay, if we run this again, now it tells me 54 bronze, 54 failed, and valid is 0. And this should now have the quarantine. If I refresh this on my quarantine, I should see all of the record that failed. And you can see the folder created is news article. These are all the files that failed to pass. And if I go to my bronze again and add an additional layer of duplication, now if I read my bronze, this should increase from 54 to 72. And you can see that this becomes 4. So each record has 4 duplications. And if I go to my silver again and I run this, reading from the bronze layer, it's going to tell me 74 records are in the bronze, 74 will fail, 72 will fail, and 0 will pass. And when I come to my quarantine, I refresh this, you see more records have been added to it. Okay, something else I wanted to show you is in my storage account. You can see when I go to news data, come to silver, because this is the one we just completed, you will see the partitioning that was done on the country and the partition by country. If I have another country, let's say the UK, is going to have another partition for the UK, Poland, and just any country I want to have. And it makes it very easy for me when I want to query that data. Okay, so just to recap, we've gotten the data, we've created the bronze, and we've transformed to the receiver, and we added the QC, the quality check, and the sentiment analysis, and we have the quarantine zone. The next thing we're going to do is the gold. And for the gold, we're also going to create the data model, and from there we're going to write to the Hive tables. Let's go back to our notebook and see how we could do the later part of this. So I have another function I've written called write to data lake and Hive. The first one I just write to the data lake, but this one I also want to write to Hive tables for analytics. And it's pretty much the same like the first function I wrote to write, but this one I just added an additional layer that is going to help us create the database for the Hive and create the different Hive tables that we need using this. What are the arguments I'm taking? The data frame. I'm going to take the layer. What layer am I writing to? Obviously is gold, but I might want to do something else and write to another layer. Partitioning, and I'm also taking the mode, which is overwrite for the gold, and I'm going to provide the Hive table name. Everything looks good on the helper function side, not so much heavy on helper function, because what I'm going to be doing is going to be straightforward. Let me look for my gold, and this is my gold. As we normally do, I'm going to run the helper function, and here a couple of functions and modules that I'm going to be needing. Like I mentioned, there are two ways of doing gold, which I'm going to be talking about. There are more ways of doing it, but I'm going to be speaking about two. First is to do an aggregation on your gold. You do aggregation on all of the tables and the metrics you're going to use in your analytics. The second one is to do the data model, the dimension tables, the fact tables, and every other entities you're going to be using in your analytics. I'm going to be doing the later because I prefer that method because it helps the data analyst to be kind of flexible in what they're going to do, especially when they're writing the DAX queries and the different transformations they want to do within Power BI. If the data volume is too much, aggregation is usually preferred because it helps the dashboard to run faster. But if it's within a sizable volume and something that is manageable, having the data model is quite incredible. And now, what am I doing? I'm going to be writing the main, or let me call it the big function, to process and write to gold. I'll be reading from the receiver, and in this function, I'm going to be taking the silver path and I'm going to be taking the gold path, just two arguments. The first is the dim source. I'm going to be creating a dimension table called dimension source, just having two columns. The first is going to be a source ID, which is going to be a row number counting from 1 to the number of sources that we have available, and I'm going to be doing a distinct select of all of the sources to create this table. I'm also going to be creating another table called the author. The author also has an ID, which is gotten from the window function row number. And I'm going to be doing a distinct select of all of the author. And here I'm just saying that anywhere I don't have any author available, I call it unknown. And after that, I'm going to be joining both tables to my main table, which is the Silver DF. Here, I'm going to be joining them to the Silver DF. And I'm going to be doing some formatting on the publish date and the ingestion time as well. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to say order by the URL. Finally, I'm going to be creating a unique ID for my fact table. And the unique ID is going to be called the article ID. And I'm creating that for my fact table. Later on, I'm going to return all the columns that I want to be included in my fact table. And when I'm done, I'm going to write the individual data frames to data lake and to Hive. And here you can see dim source. I'm writing dim source. I'm also going to write the dim author, and I'm going to write the fact news articles. This is not cast in stone because every analytics has an end goal in mind. My own end goal might not be your end goal, and it's for you to decide what kind of insight you want to derive from the news data. And if you know the insight you want to derive, you could have that kind of influences or shapes how you design your data model. This is mine and yours might be different. When I'm done with this, I'm going to say gold modeling complete, all tables saved successfully. Okay, so remember I told you I'm taking just two arguments, the silver path and the gold layer. The gold layer is going to be called gold and the silver path is this. Let's try this. Oh, sorry, there's an error here. So let's try this and see how this is going to work. I'm now going to call the function. It tells me this is not defined. It's very simple because I've not run this yet. And let me be sure I've run every other one. So let me just start from the top. Run this, and run this finally. This is one of those rare occasions where everything runs without problem. Kudos. And if I come to my catalog, I see my Hive Metastore, and in the Hive Metastore, I have a database called News Articles. And in the database, I could see my author, dim author. I can see the sample data here, dim author created. I see the dim source here. I could see the sample data here created as well. I can now see my fact table. My fact table here has been created. If you want to connect this to your visualization tool, whether Power BI, Tableau, or whichever one is compatible with Databricks, you can come here and you can see open in Tableau, open in Power BI, and when you click on this, it's going to download a config you can use to do that on Power BI. I'm not going to be doing that in this video because I've done a video on how to do that connection, and I'm not also going to be doing visualization. The focus of this video is to show like an end-to-end on how you can take your data from the extraction and get it down to the data modeling part. And if I come to my storage account, I can come to this place and I see my gold here. Click on the gold, you can see the dim author, dim source, and the fact news articles. So if you're a data analyst, you can do a lot of play around in Databricks. You can come to SQL editor here and you could create your own SQL query and just query from the data that I have there, and you can see that it gives you all of the different database that you have. You choose what database you want to work with. You can say select all from dim author or dim source or whatever it is. Well, yours might not have this IntelliSense or might not even run if you don't have an SQL cluster created. To do that, when you come to compute, instead of going to the regular compute, create compute, just go to SQL warehouses and you create one. I just created one called the Hive Store, and the Hive Store, the type is a serverless one, and I can use it to interact with my warehouse on Databricks. And so here I can select all from this, and when I run this using the shift enter, or I could just run at the top there, I could see my data return. It just feels so natural, like you using MSQL or whichever structured database. And when you're done, you could set up a job. And part of my recommendation is to have an orchestration notebook. An orchestration notebook is an enhancement you can add to this. With an orchestration notebook, you have just one central notebook where you run each of these different functions. Orchestration notebook picks this, which is like you running the main function, and that single notebook can now be set up as a job. And when you set it up as a job, it runs every time you want it to run, and you have your pipeline set up. Alternatively, you can also do this on maybe ADF. You're using Synapse Analytics, you could set up a pipeline with that, but everything really can be done in Databricks, so no need going out. And I think that is it. Thanks for enjoying the video. I know it was a long one, but I guess it was worth it. I'm going to catch you on the next one. Bye for now. Cheers.